I hadn't planned on going on a cruise. The idea came from my older sister, who basically shoved the travel brochure into my hands during a dinner I didn't want to attend. "You need a break," she said. "Seriously, Josh, you've been stuck in your apartment working remote for over a year, and you're turning into a hermit." She wasn't wrong. And after my last situationship imploded in a blaze of vague texts and unmatched energy, I figured maybe some sun and open water wouldn't be the worst idea. I booked a week-long cruise to the Bahamas, a solo traveler package on sale. They mentioned something about shared accommodation, but I didn't think much of it. I figured I'd be lumped in with some quiet retiree who slept at 8 p.m. and smelled like peppermint. Instead, I walked into cabin 726 and met Logan. And nothing about Logan said peppermint. He was standing shirtless in front of the tiny mirror, toothbrush in hand, dark hair tousled like he'd just come from a wind tunnel or a modeling shoot. He glanced over his shoulder as I walked in, eyebrows raised in this slow, casual arc. "You, Josh?" I nodded, trying not to visibly blink at the sight of him. Yeah, you're Logan," he said, then turned back to the mirror. They told me I'd be bunking with someone, but I figured it'd be a 50-year-old dude with sleep apnea. I dropped my bag on the small bench by the bunk beds. "Sorry to disappoint." He snorted a laugh, then wiped his mouth with a towel slung around his neck. "Nah, you're fine." That was my introduction. The cabin was small, 2 bunks, a narrow closet, and a bathroom so tight you had to sit sideways if you wanted to stretch your legs. We were close enough that I could smell his cologne from the top bunk when he came back from dinner. At first, we didn't talk much. He kept to himself, always with headphones in, lounging shirtless on the bottom bunk, scrolling through his phone, or watching something with a barely there smirk. He wore gym shorts most of the time, no shirt, no shoes. And every now and then, when he caught me glancing, he'd arch a brow like he knew exactly what I was thinking. I tried not to think too hard about him. Logan was the kind of guy who looked like he belonged in a different part of the ship, the VIP level, maybe with a girlfriend named Chloe and a personal trainer who came along for the trip. But he was bunked with me, a 29-year-old graphic designer from Chicago who was just hoping to avoid sunburn and get drunk at a karaoke bar once. We didn't start talking until the second night, after we both ended up at the same trivia event in the main lounge. I saw him across the room, alone, nursing a rum and coke. I was on a team with 2 older couples who were more interested in the free snacks than the trivia itself. When we crossed paths near the bar afterward, he stopped me with a small smirk. "You're not bad at trivia," he said. I shrugged. "I read too much." "You staying in tonight?" I blinked. "I mean, yeah, probably. Why?" He leaned one elbow on the bar, giving me this look, this unreadable, casual kind of curiosity. "They've got a silent disco on deck 11. Figured I'd go, but I get bored alone." I wasn't sure if he was inviting me or just thinking out loud, but I ended up there anyway. We didn't dance together, not exactly. But we moved in the same circle, orbiting around the same beat, side-glancing between songs. And when we walked back to the room, sweaty and buzzed, the air between us felt different. The cabin lights were off when we got back. He flopped onto his bunk without turning them on. "You snore?" he asked. "Only if I'm dead tired." There was a pause. "Cool," he said, and that was it. But that was the night something changed. I felt it. He did too. And the next morning, I woke up to find him watching me from the bottom bunk, face half shrouded by a pillow, eyes unreadable. "Morning," I said, my voice hoarse. He didn't smile. Just said, "You talk in your sleep." I froze. "Oh, I managed." What did I say? He just rolled over without answering. And I lay there, heart suddenly hammering, wondering what the hell I might have let slip in the dark. I spent the whole next day trying to remember what I could have possibly said in my sleep. Did I talk about work? My ex? God forbid, did I say something about him? Logan didn't bring it up again. Not during breakfast, where we awkwardly ended up at the same table in the main dining room. Not while we both got sunburned on the upper deck later, side by side on lounge chairs. Not even when we both laughed too hard at a cruise staffer trying to teach salsa to a group of retired tourists. If anything, he was acting more normal, which somehow made it worse. He didn't need to say anything. The way he looked at me now felt different, like we were in on some unspoken secret, something subtle, dangerous. That night, after too many tropical drinks and the limbo contest that ended with him pulling something in his back, I was way lower than that guy, come on. We ended up back in our cabin again. The air felt heavier than usual, like the tiny space was holding its breath. He flopped down on his bunk with a sigh and peeled his shirt off like it was nothing. I tried not to watch, but, come on. So, he said, staring at the ceiling, you travel a lot? Not really, I said, kicking off my sneakers and climbing up into the top bunk. This is the first time I've taken more than 3 days off work in over a year. No boyfriend? The question hit me square in the chest. No, I said slowly. He didn't respond right away. I heard him shift, probably turning to face the wall. Me neither, he said after a beat. There was something in his tone, a kind of quiet, casual honesty that caught me off guard. I wanted to say something, ask something, but I didn't know what. And the silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged. I turned over and stared at the ceiling, feeling the ship sway gently beneath me. I could hear the distant thrum of music still going from one of the top decks, the occasional soft creak of metal. You said I talk in my sleep, I said finally. What did I say? Another pause. Then, quietly, you said my name. I felt my stomach drop. My throat went dry. Oh, yeah. I heard him shift again. The springs creaked as he sat up. I stayed still, frozen. You don't remember? I swallowed. No. More silence, the kind that made your ears ring. Then I felt the bunk shake. A footstep. Another. He was climbing up. I looked over just in time to see his head appear at the edge of the bed, lit only by the pale glow from the hallway light under the door. Move over, he said, voice low. What? I'm not going to do anything. Just move. I don't know why I did. Maybe it was the way he said it, or maybe it was the way his eyes didn't match his voice, like something in him was also holding its breath. He slid in beside me, barely enough space for both of us. Our shoulders touched, then our hips, then more. The heat of his body was immediate. Neither of us said anything for a full minute. You were dreaming, he said softly. About what? He didn't answer. I turned my head slightly. He was staring at the ceiling like I had been before. His arm brushed against mine. Not accidental. Not anymore. You sure you don't remember? He asked again, his voice a little quieter now. I shook my head. Do you want to? He asked. I wasn't sure if he meant the dream, or something else entirely, and I wasn't sure which answer was more dangerous. But I nodded anyway. The air in that tiny cabin felt like it was made of static. Every breath I took felt loud, almost intrusive. Logan lay next to me, barely an inch of space between us now, though I wasn't even sure that was on purpose anymore. Or maybe it was all on purpose. You nodded, he said after a moment. Yeah. Why? I wasn't sure how to answer that without unraveling something. Myself, maybe. The week had started as just a vacation, a break from work and my life and the general burnout I hadn't wanted to admit I was drowning in. But now, lying there with this guy, this impossibly calm, unreadable, annoyingly good-looking guy, I felt like I was walking into something I hadn't planned for. I don't know, I said honestly. That seemed to satisfy him. He shifted slightly, enough that I could feel the brush of his knee against mine under the thin blanket. Can I ask you something? Sure. You ever been with a guy before? I stared at the ceiling, then at the porthole, then back at nothing. Yeah, I said. A couple times. There was a pause. Then, was it good? That question surprised me. Yeah, I said. Mostly. Mostly? I sighed, turning my head to glance at him. He was already looking at me. Sometimes it feels like people are just experimenting with you, I said. Like they're using you to figure out something about themselves, and you're just kind of a mirror. Logan nodded slowly, like he understood that more than he was letting on. I've never been with a guy, he said, but I've thought about it. For a while, actually. I tried not to react, but inside, something tightened. He didn't look away. I thought maybe it was just a phase, or curiosity, but it doesn't feel like that anymore. What does it feel like? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned a little closer. I could feel his breath on my cheek now. Like I want to try it, he said, but not with just anyone. There was a beat of silence. Then another. He reached up, slowly, and brushed a strand of hair from my forehead. His fingers lingered a second longer than they needed to. Why me? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Because you didn't try to be anything around me. I wasn't sure what that meant, not completely, but I felt it. In the way he looked at me like he was trying to figure out something fragile, in the way his voice had dropped just slightly, into something almost vulnerable. His hand lowered, resting lightly on the space between us. Can I? He asked. I didn't need him to finish the sentence. I reached for his hand and laced my fingers with his. Neither of us said anything after that. We lay there, in silence, fingers tangled, heat pulsing between us like waves. I could feel his thumb brushing against mine, slow and deliberate. Nothing else happened that night. No sudden moves. No dramatic kisses. Just that. His hand in mine, and a quiet understanding settling in the dark. But I didn't sleep much, because for the first time on this trip, I was wide awake. And I had no idea what tomorrow was going to look like. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight filtering through the porthole, casting soft lines across the blanket. I blinked slowly, half hoping I dreamed everything, just so I wouldn't have to overanalyze it. But Logan's hand was still in mine. He was already awake, eyes open, resting on the ceiling again, like he'd been lost in thought for hours. Hey, I said, my voice still hoarse from sleep. He turned his head toward me, and for a second he looked younger, less composed, less guarded. Morning, he murmured. We lay like that a moment longer, neither of us moving, neither pulling our hands away. It was only when a loud voice came over the ship's PA system announcing breakfast hours that we finally stirred. He didn't say anything as he slipped his hand out of mine and sat up on the edge of the bed, rubbing the back of his neck. I sat up too, watching his shoulders tense slightly like he was bracing for something. You okay? I asked. Yeah, he said after a beat. I just wasn't expecting that. Which part? He cracked a small smile and looked over his shoulder at me. All of it. We didn't talk much as we got ready. Just moved around each other in the cramped space, brushing teeth, changing shirts, avoiding too long stares. But it wasn't awkward. It felt tentative, like we were both afraid of waking whatever spell the night before had cast. By the time we made it to breakfast, Logan had slipped back into his usual cool composure. He made casual jokes with the server, teased me for ordering the most boring pancakes imaginable, and managed to charm the older couple seated at our table within 5 minutes. But every now and then, his foot would nudge mine under the table, and when I looked at him, he'd already be looking at me. Just for a second. And that was all it took. After breakfast, we split up for a while. He wanted to hit the gym, and I needed a quiet place to catch up on emails I had been ignoring. I found a shady spot near the adult pool and tried to concentrate, but my brain was still stuck in last night, and the way his fingers had felt laced with mine, and the way his voice had dipped when he asked if he could touch me. By late afternoon, I found him again. Or rather, he found me. I was reading near one of the upper decks, legs stretched out, sunglasses on, trying not to fall asleep in the sun. Logan dropped down into the chair beside me without a word, took a long sip of whatever frozen drink he was holding, then leaned over and asked, "You want to sneak off somewhere?" My heart skipped. "Where?" "I found this little corner on the front of Deck 9, he said. "Nobody goes there. You can see nothing but ocean." "Sounds like a great place to get murdered," I muttered. He grinned. If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't have held your hand all night. I couldn't argue with that. We slipped away, casual but deliberate. No one noticed. Deck 9's hidden spot was exactly like he'd said. Quiet, empty, just a tiny overlook behind some lifeboat equipment where the wind whipped against your shirt and the sea stretched endlessly in every direction. We stood there for a while, shoulder to shoulder, watching the horizon. I don't really know what I'm doing, Logan said quietly. I figured, I said, offering a small smile, but I liked last night, more than I thought I would. I turned to look at him. His expression was serious, but not scared. Just honest. I did too, I said. And we don't have to define it. We can just see where it goes. He nodded, then looked away again, squinting into the sun. I keep thinking I'm gonna wake up and be embarrassed, but I'm not. There was something in his voice when he said that, like he was almost relieved by his own lack of regret. I leaned slightly, our arms brushing. Then don't wake up yet, I said. He looked at me long and slow, and then finally he leaned in. It wasn't dramatic. There were no fireworks, no swelling music. Just his lips on mine, warm and unsure and real. It lasted maybe 5 seconds. But it was enough to wreck me in the best possible way. After the kiss, we just stood there, quiet and still, the wind tugging at our clothes while the ocean stretched out around us like it didn't care what just happened. Logan didn't step back. He just looked at me, eyes slightly narrowed, like he was trying to gauge how he felt in real time. So, I said, trying to break the tension gently, was that part of the sightseeing tour? He let out a short laugh, his shoulders relaxing. Shut up. I smiled, but the truth was, I was buzzing inside. Not because of the kiss alone, but because of the way he hadn't freaked out after it. No sudden retreat, no apology, no nervous backpedaling. Just calm, unhurried Logan being Logan, even here. I'm still figuring this out, he said after a second. Like, I don't even know if this is something I'll want long-term or just me, I offered, more curious than hurt. His eyes met mine. Maybe, I don't know. But right now, I just want to keep being around you. That wasn't something I'd expected him to say. Logan, from the moment we met, had been this cool, unreadable kind of guy. But now he was just honest. Tentative, sure, but not hiding behind a wall. I can work with that, I said. We didn't head back to the main decks right away. We stayed out there for another half hour, talking about nothing. Favorite TV shows, foods we hated, childhood crushes. He swore his first one was his babysitter. I admitted mine was Zach from Power Rangers. By the time we returned to our cabin, it was almost time for dinner. As we stepped inside, Logan pulled off his shirt without thinking, something he'd done a dozen times already this trip. But this time, I felt my stomach tighten. Shower first? He asked. You go ahead, I said, sitting on the edge of my bed. I'll wait. While he was in there, I stared at the wall and tried to process the fact that this was real. This wasn't just some flirty maybe experiment from a bored straight guy. He kissed me. He wanted me around. He admitted all of it without pressure. And yeah, I didn't know what would happen when we got off the ship, but for once, I didn't feel like that had to matter right now. Logan stepped out a few minutes later, hair damp, towel slung low around his waist. He froze for a beat when he saw me looking, then smirked. What? He asked. Nothing. Say it. I shrugged. Just wondering if you always walk around like that, or if it's for my benefit now. He grinned. Little of both. He didn't move right away. Just stood there, damp and flushed and, well, ridiculously distracting. Then he reached into his suitcase slowly, pulling out clean clothes. You gonna stare the whole time, or? Absolutely, I said. He laughed again, low and easy. Dinner that night felt like a date, even though it technically wasn't. We shared a table with a couple from Florida and 2 single women who clearly picked up on the vibe between us. One of them leaned over midway through dessert and whispered, "You guys are a cute couple." Logan blinked. I was about to correct her politely, but before I could say anything, he just smiled and said, "Thanks." That caught me off guard. After dinner, we skipped the comedy show and ended up walking along the outer deck, where the ocean was black and endless and the ship lights glowed like halos. We didn't talk much, just walked, bumping shoulders every now and then, our hands brushing occasionally but not quite intertwining. Until he stopped near the railing, turned to me and said, "I keep waiting for this to get weird." "Is it?" "No." He leaned forward. "Not even a little." He kissed me again. This time slower, more deliberate. And when we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "You should sleep in my bunk tonight." Not as a question, not a demand, just a quiet offer. And I didn't even hesitate. It was around midnight when we finally slipped back into our cabin. The hallway outside was quiet, just the soft hum of the ship and the distant sound of someone laughing 2 decks down. We didn't speak. Logan just held the door open, waited for me to step in, then closed it softly behind us. Inside, the cabin was dim, lit only by the glow of the hallway lights slipping in from under the door. We didn't turn anything on. He pulled his shirt off again, less casually this time, and sat on the edge of the bottom bunk. I stood there, uncertain for a second. Not nervous, just aware. The moment felt bigger than the space it happened in. Logan looked up at me, his voice quiet. "You don't have to. I know." I peeled off my own shirt and climbed into the bunk with him. It was a tight fit, our legs tangling immediately. I could feel his heartbeat where his chest brushed mine. For a minute we just lay there, facing each other in the dark, the warmth between us growing with every shallow breath. Then he reached up, touched the side of my face, and leaned in again. The kiss this time was different. Slower. More curious. His lips moved carefully, like he was trying to memorize how it felt, like he didn't want to rush through it. His hand slid from my cheek to the back of my neck, fingers curling slightly in my hair. I kissed him back, just as slowly, the heat building between us like steam. But there was no rush. No expectation. It wasn't about getting anywhere fast. It was about being there, in that moment, with him. Eventually we pulled apart just enough to breathe, our foreheads touching. "This okay?" he whispered. "Yeah." We didn't talk much after that. Just touched. Explored. It was awkward in the best way, the kind that happens when 2 people are learning each other in real time. There were moments of clumsiness, nervous laughter, soft swearing when knees bumped or an elbow hit the wall. But none of it mattered. At one point, he traced slow circles across my back with his fingertips. "You're warm," he murmured. "You're freezing," I whispered back. He laughed against my skin. "Guess we're a good match then." We didn't go all the way. It didn't feel like that kind of night. What we did instead was fall asleep tangled together, his hand curled against my chest. Our legs knotted under the thin blanket. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't wake up in the middle of the night overthinking everything. I just slept. The next morning, I woke up first. Sunlight pooled through the porthole again, golden and soft. Logan was still asleep, one arm draped over my waist, his face tucked against my neck. He looked peaceful. And real. No pretense. No smug smirk. Just him. I stared at the ceiling for a minute, wondering how the hell I was going to go back to normal after this. I didn't know if he felt the same. I didn't know what he wanted after this cruise. I didn't know if this was a blip, an experiment, or the start of something neither of us had the words for. But for once, the uncertainty didn't scare me. I turned my head, kissed his hair, and whispered, "Morning." He stirred slightly, tightened his arm around me, and mumbled, "5 more minutes." I smiled into the pillow. We had 2 more days left on the ship. And I had a feeling they were going to change everything. The last 2 days of the cruise felt like a blur. Not because we spent every moment wrapped around each other, though there were definitely moments like that, but because everything suddenly felt brighter, lighter, like someone had turned the saturation up on the entire experience. We still did the cruise stuff. Buffet breakfasts, lounge chairs, awkward group games hosted by overly enthusiastic staff. But now there was this quiet electricity between us that didn't need to be talked about. It just was. Logan would brush my hand when we passed each other in a narrow hallway. He'd bump his knee against mine under the table during dinner. And at night, after the lights were off, we'd slide into the same bunk and talk about everything. Music, childhood, the weird way people always assume they know you by your face. "I didn't think I'd like this," he said once, his voice low in the dark. "Sharing space with someone, I thought I'd get annoyed." "Same," I said, "but this doesn't feel like sharing. It feels like—" He trailed off, but I knew what he meant. It felt easy. It felt like hours. Still, the end was coming. We both knew it. The night before we docked, the ship threw a farewell party on the top deck. Everyone was dressed in white, dancing under fairy lights and a sky full of stars. Logan didn't dance. He just leaned against the railing with a beer and watched, his expression unreadable. "You all right?" I asked, nudging him with my shoulder. He nodded, then shook his head. "Not really." I waited. "I don't want this to end," he admitted. "Then it doesn't have to." He looked at me, eyes squinting a little from the wind. "You mean that?" "I live in Chicago," I said. "You're in LA, right?" He nodded. "That's a flight, not a breakup." He smiled a little, then turned back to the sea. "Yeah, I guess you're right." "You don't have to figure everything out right now," I added. "We've got time." He didn't say anything for a while, just stood there, beer in hand, watching the ocean. Then he took a deep breath, turned to me, and said, "Okay, let's see where this goes." That night, in bed, we didn't do anything more than hold each other. But the way he wrapped his arm around me, the way he buried his face in the crook of my neck, it felt like more than anything we'd done before. It felt like the start of something. The morning we docked, everything moved fast. People rushing to get off the ship, announcements blaring, suitcases banging down narrow halls. Logan and I packed in silence, side by side. Every now and then, we'd glance at each other and smile like we were both thinking the same thing. That really happened. When it was finally time to go, we lingered by the exit ramp a little longer than necessary. "You sure about this?" I asked him. He nodded. "I'll call you when I land." "You better." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he stepped forward, placed his hand on the back of my neck, and pulled me in for a kiss. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't shy. It was just his. And when he pulled back, he smirked. "See you soon, bunkmate." The airport drop-off zone was chaos. Cars honking, luggage carts rattling, families shouting final instructions at each other. Logan and I stood there with our suitcases, neither of us quite sure how to do this part. He was flying west, I was flying north. 2 separate gates, 2 separate cities, but one shared week that didn't feel small at all. "You sure you don't want coffee before you go?" I asked. He chuckled. "Man, if I drink anything right now, I'll miss my flight. I'm already one lost shoe away from a meltdown." "You?" I teased. "Mister, I don't stress about anything." "I stress." He gave me a look. "I just don't advertise it." We shifted awkwardly, neither of us wanting to take the first step away from the other. Usually, goodbyes are clean, expected, predictable. But this one had weight. He took a breath, looked down at his hands, then back at me. "I keep thinking I'm gonna wake up tomorrow and pretend none of this happened," he said quietly. That hit harder than I expected. "Do you want to pretend?" I asked. He shook his head instantly. "No, not even a little." I stepped closer. "Then don't." He nodded slowly, like the idea was still settling into his bones. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Whatever this is, dating a guy, liking a guy, not freaking out about liking a guy, you don't have to know right away. And you're okay with that? With me being slow, messy, confused sometimes?" "Yes," I said. "I'm okay with you being human." He let out a breath like he'd been holding it the entire morning. I want to keep talking, he said. Keep seeing where this goes. I want to try. That's enough, I said. That's more than enough. A boarding announcement echoed overhead. Logan checked the screen, then ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. I gotta go, he muttered. Yeah. Another pause. Then he stepped forward and, right there, in front of dozens of strangers rushing around us, he pulled me into a hug. Not a quick one, not a polite one, a real one, tight, warm, honest. He buried his face in my shoulder for a second, breathing in like he wasn't ready to let go. I held him just as tightly. When he finally stepped back, his eyes were a little glassy, not crying, but close. Call me when you land, he said. I will. And if I forget, you won't, I said. He cracked a small smile. Yeah, I won't. He grabbed his suitcase handle, backed up a step, and gave me one last look. The kind of look that said, this is not over. Then he turned and jogged towards security, glancing over his shoulder once, twice, 3 times. I watched until he disappeared behind the line. When I finally made it to my own gate, I sat down, pulled out my phone, and hesitated before typing. Me. Hey, I miss you already. I wasn't expecting a response that fast. Logan. Dude. I literally just sat down in my seat. Logan. Also Logan. Same, I stared at the screen for a long moment, smiling like an idiot. The ship was behind us. The week was over. But whatever this thing was, it was just starting.